"Shut up and leave," the cop roared at a single mom shielding a bleeding teen. But when she flashed her badge, the world discovered she wasn't just a mom, she was internal affairs, and his nightmare had just begun. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Thunder rumbled across the darkening sky as Elena Ramirez guided her car through the rain-slicked streets. Streetlights flickered to life, casting golden pools on the wet pavement. In the passenger seat, her 12-year-old daughter Sophia clutched her library books to her chest. The fresh paper smell mixing with the damp air seeping through the car's vents. "Mom, can we stop for milk?" Sophia asked, pointing to the corner store's neon sign glowing through the misty evening. "We're all out, remember?" Elena checked her watch. 7:45 p.m. "Quick stop," she agreed, pulling into the small parking lot. The windshield wipers squeaked across the glass as she cut the engine. Inside the fluorescent-lit store, Sophia wandered to the dairy section while Elena grabbed a few other essentials. The routine comfort of their Thursday evening library trips always made her feel closer to her daughter. These quiet moments were precious, especially since losing Miguel 3 years ago. A loud thud against the store's front window made both Elena and Sophia jump. Through the rain-streaked glass, Elena saw 2 police officers surrounding a teenage boy near the entrance. One officer had the boy pressed against the wall, while the other stood watch. "Stay here," Elena told Sophia firmly, setting down her shopping basket. Her heart raced as she pushed through the store's door, the bell jingling sharply above her. The scene before her made her blood run cold. The boy couldn't have been more than 15, his dark hoodie already soaked from the rain. One officer, his nameplate read Kent, had his forearm pressed against the boy's chest, while his partner looked on with practiced indifference. "Please," the boy was saying, his voice trembling. "I didn't do anything wrong." Elena's protective instincts kicked in immediately. "Excuse me," she called out, stepping closer despite the rain now soaking through her light jacket. "Is there a problem here?" Officer Kent barely turned his head. "Ma'am, this is police business. Move along." But Elena couldn't move along. Not when she saw the fear in the boy's eyes. Not when she recognized the all-too-familiar abuse of power playing out before her. "The boy seems cooperative," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Maybe we could—" Kent spun around, his face twisted with anger. He released the boy, just long enough to shove Elena backward. She stumbled, catching herself against a parking meter. "I said shut up and leave!" The humiliation burned hot in her chest. Through the store window, she could see Sophia watching with wide eyes, pressed against the glass. The same eyes that had watched her fight through grief, through prejudice, through countless moments when giving up would have been easier. Elena straightened her jacket, ignoring the rain that now plastered her dark hair to her face. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her badge, holding it up so the store's lights caught the metal. Her voice was quiet but carried the weight of authority she'd earned through years of service. Internal affairs. The effect was immediate. Officer Kent's aggressive stance faltered, his hand dropping from where it had been pinning the boy. His partner took an unconscious step backward, suddenly finding great interest in his shoes. The rain continued to fall, but in that moment, everything else seemed frozen in time. The boy still pressed against the wall, Kent's face draining of color, and Elena standing firm, her badge gleaming in the storefront lights. Through the window, Sophia's expression had changed, from fear to something like pride, and Elena felt a familiar ache in her chest. This was why she did this job. Not just for justice, but for her daughter, for this scared teenage boy, for everyone who needed someone to stand up when others would look away. Kent's mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. The power dynamic had shifted so suddenly he seemed unable to process it. His partner was already backing toward their patrol car, trying to distance himself from what had just transpired. The teenage boy remained frozen against the wall, his eyes darting between Elena and the officers, unclear if this development was going to help or hurt his situation. Rain dripped from his hood, creating small puddles at his feet. "I'll need both of your badge numbers," Elena said, her voice carrying the same quiet authority. She pulled out her phone, its screen lighting up against the growing darkness. And I'll need to know exactly what prompted this interaction. Kent's face twisted through several emotions: shock, anger, fear, before settling into a mask of forced professionalism. But Elena could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. Inside the store, Sophia had pressed her hand against the glass, her library books forgotten on the counter. She watched her mother stand in the rain, unflinching, as she faced down the much larger officers. It was a moment that would stay with both of them, a lesson in courage that no library book could teach. The neon signs hummed overhead, their light mixing with the street lamps to cast everything in an otherworldly glow. Thunder rolled again in the distance, but Elena held her ground, badge still raised, waiting for the officers to comply with her authority. She was soaked to the skin now, but she didn't feel the cold. All she felt was the weight of responsibility, to her badge, to justice, to her daughter watching through the window, and to this frightened boy who needed someone to stand up for him. The moment stretched out, measured in raindrops and heartbeats, as Officer Kent realized his position of power had evaporated like steam from the wet pavement beneath their feet. The rain drummed steadily against the sidewalk as Officer Kent took an uncertain step backward, his earlier bravado dissolving at the sight of Elena's badge. Water trickled down the teenager's bruised face as he pressed closer to Elena's side, his thin frame shaking, whether from cold or fear, she couldn't tell. "I said, stand down," Elena repeated firmly, her voice carrying despite the patter of rain. She kept one protective arm around the boy while maintaining steady eye contact with Kent. The second officer, younger and clearly uncomfortable, had already backed away toward their patrol car. Kent's jaw clenched. "This isn't your jurisdiction, Ramirez." He spat her name like it was something bitter. "Actually, it island." Elena's voice remained calm, but carried an edge of steel. "And I'd love to hear you explain why you're roughing up a minor outside a convenience store." A small crowd had gathered under the store's awning, their faces illuminated by the fluorescent lights streaming through the windows. Sophia stood in the doorway, clutching their unpaid-for carton of milk, her dark eyes wide with worry. "He was acting suspicious," Kent muttered, tugging at his wet collar. "Hanging around the store entrance." "I was just waiting for my mom," the boy spoke up, his voice cracking. "She's working late at the diner. I didn't do anything wrong." Elena felt him trembling harder. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Marcus," he whispered. "Marcus Walker." A ripple of recognition passed through the onlookers. Someone whispered, "That's James Walker's kid." The name hung heavy in the air, loaded with unspoken history. Elena's heart sank. James Walker, the decorated officer whose fall from grace had split the department 3 years ago. Now she understood Kent's aggressive behavior. This wasn't just about harassing a teenager. This was about sending a message. "Officer Kent," Elena said, her tone professional but cold. "I'll need your badge number and a full incident report on my desk first thing tomorrow morning. Both officers. Am I clear?" Kent's face reddened, but he nodded stiffly. Without another word, he turned and stalked back to the patrol car, his partner hurrying after him. The crowd began to disperse, though Elena noticed several people filming with their phones. "Sophia, honey," Elena called. "Bring the milk. We're giving Marcus a ride home." Her daughter hurried over, placing a few wrinkled bills on the store counter before joining them. Elena guided Marcus to her car, noting how he winced as he moved. In the harsh glare of the store's lights, she could see the beginning of bruises forming on his cheekbone. "Do you need medical attention?" she asked, opening the passenger door. Marcus shook his head quickly. "No, ma'am. I'm okay. Just, thank you." Sophia climbed into the back seat while Elena helped Marcus into the front. His clothes were soaked through, and she cranked up the heat as soon as she started the engine. "Where's your mom working?" Elena asked, pulling away from the curb. "Lucy's Diner," Marcus replied, his voice steadier now. "On 5th Street." Elena nodded, familiar with the place. The diner was one of the few establishments that stayed open late in their small town. As she drove, she watched Marcus in her peripheral vision. He sat rigid in his seat, hands clasped tightly in his lap, staring straight ahead through the rain-streaked windshield. "You know," Sophia piped up from the back seat, "my mom helps people who get treated unfairly by police officers. That's her job." Marcus turned slightly, looking at Sophia through the rearview mirror. Really? Really, Elena confirmed. Internal affairs means I investigate police misconduct. What happened tonight? That wasn't okay. Marcus was quiet for a moment, just the sound of windshield wipers marking time. It happens a lot, he finally said. Ever since my dad. They think I'm trouble just because of my name. Elena's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She'd heard rumors about officers harassing James Walker's family after his dismissal, but nothing concrete had ever been reported. Now she wondered how many incidents had gone undocumented, how many times this boy had been pushed around with no one to stand up for him. Sophia leaned forward between the seats. That's not fair. They can't do that. No, Elena agreed. They can't. She glanced at Marcus. Would you be willing to file a formal complaint? I can help you and your mother through the process. Marcus hesitated. I don't know. Mom's already got enough to worry about. Think about it, Elena said gently. Talk to her. This kind of behavior needs to stop. They were approaching 5th Street when Elena noticed the headlights in her rearview mirror. An unmarked sedan had been following them for the past few blocks, maintaining the same distance. Her instincts, honed by years of police work, prickled with warning. The car was dark-colored, probably navy or black, its windows tinted beyond what was legally allowed. As Elena made a deliberate turn onto 5th Street, the vehicle smoothly followed, confirming her suspicions. Marcus seemed oblivious to their tale, pointing to a brightly lit diner ahead. That's Lucy's. You can drop me at the side door. Elena pulled into the diner's small parking lot, positioning her car so she could clearly see the street. The unmarked vehicle cruised past slowly, but she caught the glint of a radio antenna, definitely a police car. Elena pulled the warm casserole from the microwave, the scent of cheese and chicken filling her small kitchen. The yellow overhead light cast a cozy glow over the worn but clean table where Sophia sat quietly watching Marcus, who kept his eyes fixed on his hands. It's not fancy, Elena said, setting down the dish, but my mother's recipe never disappoints. She tried to keep her voice light as she served generous portions onto their mismatched plates. The ceramic scraped softly against the worn tablecloth, a sound that seemed too loud in the tense quiet. Sophia pushed a glass of water toward Marcus. Mom makes the best casserole, she said with a small smile. The secret is extra cheese. Marcus picked up his fork and took a tentative bite. His shoulders relaxed slightly, and he began eating with the unmistakable hunger of a teenage boy. Elena noticed his knuckles were scraped raw, telling their own story of what might have happened before the officers found him. Thank you, he mumbled between bites, not looking up. I haven't. It's been a while since I had a home-cooked meal. Elena settled into her chair, studying the boy's face in the gentle kitchen light. The bruise on his cheek was darkening, and a small cut above his eyebrow had started to scab. Marcus, she said gently, I need to understand what happened tonight. Why were those officers after you? His fork paused halfway to his mouth. The kitchen clock ticked steadily in the silence. It's because of my dad, isn't it? Sophia asked suddenly. I heard them say, Walker's kid, when they were pushing you. Marcus's face tightened, but he nodded. Yeah, Richard Walker was my father. He said the name like it carried a weight, like it was something both precious and painful. Elena remembered the name. 3 years ago, Richard Walker had been a decorated sergeant in the department. His fall from grace had been spectacular and public. Accusations of evidence tampering, taking bribes, betraying fellow officers. He died in custody before the trial, leaving behind a tainted badge and a family marked by his shame. Dad wasn't dirty, Marcus said suddenly, his voice cracking. He was trying to expose something bigger, but they got to him first. His hands trembled as he set down his fork. Now they watch me, follow me around, say they're keeping an eye on trouble. Tonight, I was just walking home from work, but He swallowed hard. Sophia reached across the table and touched his arm. We believe you, she said simply. Elena opened her mouth to respond, but her phone buzzed harshly against the table. Unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. Ramirez, she said, standing up and walking toward the sink. A voice, digitally altered and cold, crackled through the speaker. "Stay out of this, Ramirez, or you'll regret it." The line went dead. Elena's hand tightened around the phone as she turned toward the kitchen window. Outside, in the rain-slicked darkness, a pair of headlights sat idling at the curb. Just waiting. Watching. She felt Sophia's small hand slip into hers. "Mom?" her daughter whispered, fear threading through her voice. "What's going on?" Marcus stood up from the table, his face pale. "I should go. I'm just causing trouble for you both." "No," Elena said firmly, still watching those steady headlights through the raindrops on her window. "You're not going anywhere." "Not tonight." She squeezed Sophia's hand, drawing strength from her daughter's touch. "We'll figure this out together." The lights outside remained unchanged, a silent reminder that this quiet dinner had been just the beginning of something much larger than a simple case of police harassment. Elena felt the weight of 3 lives in her kitchen, her daughter's, this broken boy's, and her own, all suddenly connected by whatever darkness those headlights represented. Sophia moved closer to her mother, while Marcus stood uncertainly by the table, caught between flight and trust. The casserole sat cooling, half-eaten, as the rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows, and those watching headlights cast long shadows across Elena's kitchen floor. After clearing away the dishes and making sure Marcus got safely home in a cab, Elena walked down the hallway of their small house, her footsteps quiet on the worn carpet. Sophia's bedroom door was already open, warm light spilling out from her bedside lamp. Elena paused in the doorway, taking in the sight of her daughter sitting cross-legged on her bed, hugging her favorite stuffed rabbit, the last birthday gift from her father. The purple walls were covered with Sophia's artwork and school certificates, a reminder of brighter days. "Ready for bed, mija?" Elena asked, moving to sit on the edge of the bed. Sophia nodded but didn't let go of the rabbit. Her dark eyes, so much like her father's, looked troubled. Elena reached out to brush a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Sophia's lower lip trembled. "Mom, I heard something at school today." She pulled the rabbit closer. "Some kids were whispering during lunch, they said. They said they're going to make your mom disappear." Elena's heart clenched, but she kept her face calm. She'd learned long ago that children could read fear in their parents' eyes better than any trained detective. "Come here," Elena said softly, opening her arms. Sophia crawled into her embrace, still clutching the rabbit. "You know what makes me different from those bad officers we saw today?" Sophia shook her head against Elena's shoulder. "I have you," Elena said, running her hand over Sophia's dark hair. "And you make me stronger than any of them. You make me braver." She pulled back slightly to look into her daughter's eyes. "Remember what Pappy used to say about being brave? That being brave doesn't mean you're not scared," Sophia recited quietly. "It means doing the right thing even when you are scared." "That's right." Elena smiled, though her heart ached at the memory of her husband's words. "And you know what else? We have something they don't." "What's that?" "The truth," Elena said firmly. "The truth is like a light in the dark. It might take time, but it always finds its way out." Sophia's grip on the rabbit loosened slightly. "Like when you helped Marcus today?" "Exactly like that." Elena pulled back the covers and Sophia slid underneath them. "Sometimes people try to hide the truth because they're scared of it, but that doesn't make it go away." She tucked the blanket around Sophia's shoulders, making sure the rabbit was properly settled. "And you know what else? I have lots of people watching my back. Other good officers, Judge Martinez, even Mrs. Thompson next door. Remember how she used to be a reporter?" Sophia nodded, her eyes growing heavy. "She makes those really good cookies." "That's right." Elena leaned down and kissed her daughter's forehead. "So don't you worry about those whispers. We're going to be just fine. Promise?" "I promise, mija." Elena reached over to turn off the bedside lamp. "Sweet dreams." She waited until Sophia's breathing evened out before quietly leaving the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall for a moment, letting out a long breath. The weight of Sophia's words pressed heavy on her chest. "They're going to make your mom disappear." The house felt too quiet as Elena made her way to the kitchen. The window above the sink showed only darkness now, the earlier headlights gone. She pulled out her laptop from her work bag and set it on the kitchen table, the blue glow of the screen illuminating the worry lines around her eyes. Opening a new internal affairs report template, Elena's fingers hovered over the keyboard. The cursor blinked steadily, like a heartbeat. She began typing, Internal Affairs Preliminary Report, Case Number 2023 140 7. Officers under investigation. Kent, Michael J. Badge, 4,480. 2. Additional officers. Pending investigation. Date of incident: October 12, 2023. Location: Main Street Corner Store. Nature of complaint: excessive force, racial profiling, harassment. Elena paused, her fingers still on the keys. The facts were clear in her mind. The way Officer Kent had shoved the boy, the casual cruelty in his voice, the look of superiority that had crumbled only when she showed her badge. But there was something bigger here. Something in the way the other officer had stood back, in the unmarked car that had followed them, in the threatening phone call. She continued typing, detailing the events with precise professional language. Each click of the keys felt like another step into deeper waters. The report grew longer as she included Marcus's statement about his father, the witnesses at the scene, the anonymous threat. The kitchen clock ticked softly in the background as Elena documented everything she could remember. She knew this report would be her first official move against whatever was happening in her department. Once she submitted it, there would be no going back. A floorboard creaked somewhere in the house, making Elena's head snap up. But it was just the old house settling, the same sounds it had made every night since they'd moved in 6 years ago. Still, her hand instinctively moved to check that her service weapon was secured at her hip. Elena looked down at the report on her screen, the cursor still blinking steadily. The right thing and the easy thing were rarely the same path. Her husband had taught her that. Now, with Sophia's fearful words echoing in her mind, Elena knew she had to choose: back down and keep the peace, or push forward and expose whatever darkness was hiding behind those badges. Her fingers returned to the keyboard and she began typing again. The fluorescent lights of Martinez Grocery buzzed overhead as Elena pushed her cart down the cereal aisle, Sophia trailing beside her. Morning sunlight streamed through the store's front windows, creating long shadows between the shelves. The familiar scent of fresh bread from the bakery section usually brought comfort, but today something felt different. Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd always chatted with Elena about recipes and church events, quickly turned her cart around when she spotted them. 2 women by the dairy case stopped talking as Elena passed, their eyes following her before resuming their hushed conversation. "Mom, can we get the chocolate cereal?" Sophia asked, trying to act normal despite the obvious tension around them. Elena managed to smile. "Just 1 box, honey. We need to stick to our list today." As Sophia reached for her favorite cereal, Elena noticed Carol Matthews, her daughter's former piano teacher, approaching, but when their eyes met, Carol suddenly became very interested in studying nutrition labels, turning her back on them completely. "Good morning, Carol," Elena said anyway, her voice steady and clear. Carol mumbled something inaudible and hurried away, her cartwheels squeaking against the linoleum floor. Sophia's shoulders slumped. "Mrs. Matthews didn't even say hi. She always says hi." Elena squeezed her daughter's shoulder. "Some people don't know how to handle difficult situations, mija. It doesn't mean we've done anything wrong." They continued shopping, the whispers following them like shadows. Elena kept her head high, though each averted gaze and abrupt departure stung. She'd known there would be consequences for standing up to Officer Kent, but the speed at which the small town had turned cold surprised her. At the produce section, Elena was examining tomatoes when a familiar deep voice called out, "Elena Ramirez, just the person I was hoping to run into." Tom Harrison's weathered face broke into a warm smile as he approached. The retired officer's silver hair and lined face spoke of decades of service, but his eyes still held the same kindness Elena remembered from when her husband was alive. He wore his usual flannel shirt and worn jeans, looking more like a friendly grandfather than a decorated veteran. "Tom," Elena said, relief flooding her voice. "It's good to see you. And Miss Sophia." Tom's eyes crinkled at the corners as he looked at her daughter. "You've grown at least 2 inches since I last saw you." Sophia's face brightened. "Hi, Mr. Harrison. Did you bring any of your famous chocolate chip cookies to the station this week?" "Not this week, sweetheart, but I'll make sure to bake an extra batch just for you soon." Tom turned back to Elena, his expression growing more serious. "I heard about what happened last night. You did good, Elena. Your husband would be proud." Elena felt her throat tighten. "Not everyone seems to think so." Tom's voice lowered. "Listen, I've been on the force longer than most of these folks have been alive. What you're doing, it's necessary. This department, it's not what it used to be. These past few years, I've seen changes that worry me." A young mother, with a toddler, deliberately steered her cart around them, giving Elena a wide berth. Tom noticed and shook his head. "Don't let them get to you. Remember what Miguel always said about standing up for what's right? The right path isn't always the easy one," Elena quoted softly, remembering her late husband's words. "Exactly." Tom placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone in this, Elena. Some of us old-timers, we see what's happening. We've got your back." Sophia tugged at Elena's sleeve. "Mom, we still need bread." "You go on with your shopping," Tom said. "But Elena, if you need anything, advice, backup, or just someone to talk to, you know where to find me. Miguel was my partner for 8 years. That makes you family." The rest of their shopping went quicker, though Elena could still feel the weight of stares following them through the store. At the checkout, the usually chatty cashier barely spoke 2 words, scanning their items in silence. Outside, the morning had grown warmer, the parking lot filling with cars. Elena and Sophia walked to their vehicle, loading groceries into the trunk. As Elena reached to close it, she noticed something white stuck under the windshield wiper. "Sophia, wait here," she said, moving to the front of the car. The paper was folded once, cheap printer stock. Elena's hands were steady as she opened it, but her heart beat faster as she read the typed message. "Keep quiet." She quickly folded the note and slipped it into her pocket, trying to keep her expression neutral for Sophia's sake. But inside, her mind was racing. The threat was clear. Someone had watched them, had waited while they shopped, had wanted them to know they were being observed. "Everything okay, Mom?" Sophia asked as Elena opened the car door. Elena nodded, forcing a smile. "Just another store flyer, honey. Let's get these groceries home before the ice cream melts." As she started the engine, Elena caught sight of Tom walking to his truck across the lot. He raised his hand in a wave, and she found herself drawing strength from that simple gesture of support. The note in her pocket felt heavy, but Elena's resolve only grew stronger. They wanted her to keep quiet, but silence had never solved anything. Her husband had taught her that. She pulled out of the parking space, careful to check her mirrors for any cars that might be following them. The morning sun caught her badge where it hung from the rearview mirror, sending little sparkles of light across the dashboard. Sophia reached out to touch it, making it swing gently. "You know what, Mom?" Sophia said suddenly. "I think Mr. Harrison is right. Dad would be proud of you." The savory aroma of chicken enchiladas filled Elena's small kitchen as she placed the steaming dish on the dinner table. She'd made her mother's recipe, hoping the familiar comfort food would ease the tension hanging in the air. Marcus sat quietly, his shoulders hunched, while Sophia arranged her napkin with unusual care, avoiding everyone's eyes. "Help yourself," Elena said warmly, trying to keep her voice steady. "There's plenty to go around." Marcus reached for the serving spoon, his hand trembling slightly. A purple bruise was darkening on his wrist where Officer Kent had grabbed him. Elena noticed but didn't comment, not wanting to pressure him. "These smell amazing, Miss Ramirez," Marcus said softly, spooning enchiladas onto his plate. "Just like my abuela used to make." Sophia perked up. "Your grandmother was Mexican too?" Marcus nodded, a small smile finally breaking through. "Yeah. She lived with us until—" He trailed off, pushing rice around his plate. Elena felt her heart squeeze. She knew that unfinished sentence held pain. "You don't have to talk about anything you're not ready to share, Marcus." The clock ticked steadily on the wall as they ate in silence for a few minutes. Elena noticed Marcus taking small, careful bites, like someone used to making food last. She casually added another enchilada to his plate. "It wasn't just tonight," Marcus suddenly blurted out, dropping his fork with a clatter. "The cops, I mean. They've been watching me, following me." Elena set down her own fork, giving Marcus her full attention. "How long has this been happening?" "Since Dad." Marcus swallowed hard. "Since he tried to report Officer Kent and the others, they said nobody would believe me if I told. Said I was just a troublemaker like my father." Sophia gasped, her eyes wide. "But that's not fair. Mom, they can't do that, can they?" Elena reached across the table to squeeze her daughter's hand. "No, mija, they can't, and they won't get away with it." Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "There's more. I've seen them meeting late at night behind the old warehouse on Pine Street. They exchange packages. Money too, I think. Once I heard them talking about keeping people in line." His hands were shaking now. "When they spotted me watching, Officer Kent said if I didn't keep my mouth shut I'd end up like my dad, or worse." Elena felt ice in her veins, but kept her expression calm. She'd suspected corruption, but this pointed to something far more organized. "Marcus, what exactly happened to your father?" "They said he had a mental breakdown, that he attacked another officer and got fired." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "But Dad wasn't crazy. He saw something he wasn't supposed to see. Now he's in a facility somewhere. They won't even let me visit him." Sophia pushed her chair back suddenly, her face pale. "Mom, please don't let them hurt you!" she burst out. "I heard more at school today. Jenny's dad is a cop, and she said they're planning something bad. She said you should mind your own business or—" Sophia's voice cracked. Elena stood up and moved to her daughter's side, pulling her close. She could feel Sophia trembling against her. Marcus watched them, his own fear visible in his eyes. "Listen to me, both of you," Elena said firmly, including Marcus in her embrace. "What these officers are doing is wrong, very wrong. And yes, they're scary and powerful right now because they're hiding in the shadows. But I promise you, I will not let them hurt either of you." "But what about you?" Sophia whispered into her shoulder. Elena pulled back slightly, looking at both children's faces. Her daughter's familiar features twisted with worry, and Marcus's expression haunted by too many betrayals. In that moment, she felt something crystallize inside her. This wasn't just about upholding the law anymore. This was about protecting these children, and all the others who couldn't protect themselves. "I'm not backing down," she said quietly but with steel in her voice. "Not because I'm brave, but because staying silent would mean letting them win, letting them hurt more people." She squeezed both their shoulders. "Sometimes doing the right thing is scary, but we do it anyway." Marcus straightened slightly, some of his father's courage showing through. "I'll tell you everything I know, everything I've seen." Sophia wiped her eyes and nodded. "I'll help too, Mom. I can be brave." Elena looked at these two children, forced to grow up too fast because of others' corruption, and felt her resolve harden into something unbreakable. She would take on the entire department if she had to. Not just for justice now, but for them, for their future. The threatening note from the parking lot lay crumpled in her pocket, but its weight felt lighter now. They could threaten her, try to intimidate her, but they couldn't shake her determination. She had something worth fighting for right here at her dinner table. "Okay," she said, standing up straighter. "Let's clear these dishes, and then Marcus can tell me everything he remembers. Every detail matters." As they worked together to clean up dinner, Elena noticed both children's shoulders seemed a little less burdened. They had someone in their corner now, someone who wouldn't back down. And if the entire police department stood in her way? Well, they were about to learn what a mother's protective instincts could accomplish. The sun hadn't yet cleared the horizon when Elena guided her car through the quiet streets. Pink and orange streaks painted the sky, but she couldn't enjoy the view. Her eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror, checking for any cars that might be following them. Marcus sat in the passenger seat, his backpack clutched tight against his chest like a shield. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept well. Elena couldn't blame him. "You okay?" she asked, keeping her voice gentle. Yeah. Marcus shifted in his seat, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Just tired, Elena nodded, understanding the weight behind those simple words. Remember what we talked about. If anything feels wrong, you call me right away. I put my number in your phone. I will. He paused, then added quietly, Thanks for the ride, Miss Ramirez. After dropping Marcus at school, Elena headed to the police station. She'd arranged to meet with Officer Sarah Chen, a rookie who'd hinted at wanting to talk. They met in the coffee shop 2 blocks away, safer than the station where eyes and ears were everywhere. Sarah sat in a corner booth, hands wrapped around a paper cup. Her uniform was crisp, but worry lines creased her forehead. I shouldn't be here, she whispered, as Elena slid into the seat across from her. But you are, Elena said. Because something's not right. Sarah glanced around before leaning forward. It's not just Kent. There's a group of them. They call themselves the Old Guard. They. She swallowed hard. They target kids, like Marcus, minorities, anyone they think won't fight back. Elena took out her phone, using the Notes app to record Sarah's words. Her stomach churned as the young officer detailed incidents, harassment, excessive force, planted evidence. Names and dates formed a pattern she couldn't ignore. By lunchtime, Elena had spoken with 2 more officers. Both shared similar stories, though they were too scared to go on record. One, a veteran named Rodriguez, passed her a USB drive. Security footage, he muttered, before it gets accidentally deleted. The afternoon stretched into evening. Elena picked up Sophia from school, ordering takeout since there wasn't time to cook. They sat at the kitchen table, Sophia working on her math homework, while Elena typed furiously on her laptop, organizing her notes into a coherent report. Mom? Sophia looked up from her textbook. Are you going to catch the bad guys? Elena's fingers paused over the keyboard. Her daughter's face held both worry and hope, such a heavy combination for a 12-year-old to carry. I'm trying, mija. That's why this work is so important. I know. Sophia nodded solemnly. Like Dad always said, doing the right thing matters most. Tears pricked at Elena's eyes, but she blinked them back. Her late husband would be proud of their daughter's wisdom. She reached across the table to squeeze Sophia's hand. The quiet moment shattered as something crashed through the living room window. Glass sprayed across the floor as Sophia screamed. Elena leaped up, instinctively pulling her daughter behind her. A brick lay among the glittering shards. A piece of paper was wrapped around it, secured with a rubber band. Elena's hands shook as she carefully unwrapped it, dreading what she'd find. One word was scrawled in thick black marker. Stop. Sophia pressed against her side, trembling. Mom? Elena crumpled the paper in her fist, anger replacing fear. They thought they could intimidate her with threats and violence. But they'd made a crucial mistake. They'd threatened her in front of her daughter. And nothing made Elena Ramirez fight harder than protecting her child. She pulled out her phone to call it in, knowing even as she dialed that the responding officers would probably be Kent's allies. But she'd document everything, build her case. Show them that for every brick they threw, she'd lay another foundation stone of truth. It's okay, mija, she said, holding Sophia close as they waited for patrol cars to arrive. We're okay. The words were as much for herself as for her daughter. Through the broken window, the night air carried a chill. But Elena stood firm, her laptop still glowing with evidence on the kitchen table behind them. The glass crunched under Elena's shoes as she swept up the scattered shards from her living room floor. Sophia had finally fallen asleep after an hour of tears and trembling, but Elena's hands wouldn't stop shaking. The brick lay heavy on her coffee table, its threatening note face down beside it. At 11:47 p.m., Tom's old pickup truck rumbled into her driveway. She watched through the remaining window pane as he climbed out, tool belt already strapped around his waist. His weathered face creased with concern when she opened the door. You shouldn't have come so late, Elena said, but the relief in her voice betrayed her gratitude. Nonsense. Tom stepped inside, carrying a piece of plywood and his toolbox. Can't leave a window broken all night. Where's Sophia? Finally asleep. I put her in my room. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, watching as Tom assessed the damage. "I should have expected this, Tom. They're escalating." Tom set down his tools and turned to face her fully. In the dim living room light, his silver hair seemed to glow. He'd been her husband Miguel's partner years ago, and sometimes she could see echoes of her late husband in the way Tom carried himself, that same steady strength, that unwavering moral compass. "Sit down, Elena," he said softly. "Let me work while we talk." She sank into her armchair while Tom began measuring the window frame. The familiar sounds of his work, the snap of the measuring tape, the scratch of pencil on wood, provided an oddly comforting backdrop. "You're stirring up a hornet's nest," Tom said as he worked. "The blue wall of silence. It's not just about protecting fellow officers anymore. It's about power, control." "I know." Elena picked up the brick, turning it over in her hands. "But I can't back down now. Marcus needs someone to stand up for him. And Sophia." She set the brick down harder than intended. "I need her to see that doing the right thing matters." Tom paused in his work, leaning against the window frame. Miguel used to say the same thing. The mention of her husband's name made Elena's throat tighten. "He did?" Tom nodded, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a worn leather journal, its pages yellowed and dog-eared. "Found this while cleaning out my garage last month. Been meaning to give it to you, but—" He handed it to her. "Maybe now's the right time." Elena recognized it immediately. Miguel's service journal. He'd carried it everywhere, jotting down notes about cases, observations, concerns. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. "Miguel saw things weren't right in the department," Tom explained, returning to his work on the window. "Started documenting everything. Patterns of behavior, names, dates. He was building a case, just like you are now." Elena's eyes scanned the familiar handwriting. Pages of detailed notes about suspicious incidents, officers who seemed to operate above the law, complaints that disappeared. Her husband's careful observations spanned years. "Why didn't he ever tell me?" Tom's hammer paused, mid-swing. "To protect you and Sophia, I expect. Same reason I didn't bring this to you sooner. But now—" He resumed his work. "Now you're in it, whether we like it or not. Might as well have all the pieces." Elena flipped through the pages, her heart racing as she recognized names, including Officer Kent, the same man who'd shoved her outside the corner store. Miguel had been tracking his misconduct for months before his death. "I'll help you, Elena," Tom said, securing the plywood over the broken window. "Whatever you need. Miguel was like a brother to me. And what he started, it needs to be finished." She turned to the last entry, dated just 3 days before the accident that took Miguel's life. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. "Something bigger is happening here. Can't ignore it anymore. Sophia asked me today why some people get away with being mean. Told her what my father always told me. Do the right thing, even when it costs you everything." Elena closed the journal, pressing it to her chest. The weight of it felt like Miguel's embrace, like a torch being passed. Tom finished with the window and sat in the chair across from her, his expression grave but determined. "You're not alone in this fight," he said quietly. Miguel knew it would take more than one person to change things. He was gathering allies, building trust with people who wanted better. Those people are still here. Elena nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The journal in her hands held more than just evidence. It held her husband's courage, his dedication to justice, his hope for a better future. The same hope she fought for now. Tom stood, gathering his tools. "I'll make some calls tomorrow. There are good officers who've been waiting for someone to take a stand. But Elena—" He paused at the door. "Be careful. The people Miguel was investigating. They play rough." "I know." Elena stood, still holding the journal close. "But Miguel was right. Some things are worth the cost." After Tom left, Elena sat in the quiet living room, reading entry after entry by the light of her table lamp. Her husband's words painted a picture of corruption that had taken root years ago, spreading like a cancer through the department. But they also showed his unwavering belief that good people, standing together, could make a difference. Elena drummed her fingers on the steering wheel as she waited in the school pickup line. The autumn afternoon cast long shadows across the parking lot, and parents clustered in their usual chatting groups near the entrance. But something was different today. Sophia emerged from the building, her backpack clutched tight against her chest. She slid into the passenger seat without her usual bounce, her face drawn and serious. "Everything okay, mija?" Elena asked, reaching over to smooth her daughter's hair. Sophia glanced at the parents outside, then back at her mom. "Nobody talks to me anymore," she whispered. "Mrs. Peterson, Tommy's mom. She used to always say hi and ask about my art projects. Today she saw me coming and walked the other way." Elena's heart squeezed. She forced a smile she didn't feel. Maybe she was in a hurry. "No, Mama," Sophia's voice trembled. "Their parents are telling them to stay away from me. I heard Ashley tell Katie that her dad said we're trouble now." Elena pulled away from the curb, her mind racing. The isolation was spreading, touching not just her but her innocent daughter. She caught sight of Marcus walking alone toward the public library, his shoulders hunched against the wind. "Would it be okay if we give Marcus a ride?" Elena asked. Sophia nodded eagerly. The boy had become something of a brother figure to her over the past few days. Elena pulled up beside him. "Need a lift?" Marcus startled, then relaxed when he recognized them. "Thanks, Miss Ramirez." He climbed into the back seat, his worn backpack cradled in his lap. Instead of heading straight home, Elena drove to the small park near their house. It was usually busy this time of day, but now it sat empty. Perhaps another sign of how people were avoiding them. She parked under a maple tree shedding its red leaves. "Sophia, honey, would you mind playing on the swings for a few minutes? I need to talk to Marcus." Sophia gave her mother a knowing look beyond her years. "About the bad cops?" Elena's breath caught. "Yes, mija, just for a few minutes." Once Sophia was out of earshot, Elena turned in her seat to face Marcus. "I need to know everything, Marcus. About your father, about what he found. People are scared of us now, and I need to understand why." Marcus stared at his hands. "I don't want to get you in more trouble." "I'm already in trouble," Elena said gently. "But maybe knowing more will help keep us all safer." He was quiet for so long, Elena thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he began to speak. "Dad was a good cop, everyone said so. But then he started noticing things, like how certain officers would rough up kids in my neighborhood, mostly black and Latino kids, how reports would disappear, how complaints never went anywhere." Elena nodded encouragingly. "Go on." He started keeping records, names, dates, incidents. He found out there was this whole group of officers working together. Marcus's voice grew bitter. "They called themselves cleaners, like they were cleaning up the streets. But really, they were just bullies with badges." "Did he report it?" Marcus laughed hollowly. "He tried, went up the chain of command, followed procedure. But every time he filed a report, it vanished. Every time he gathered evidence, it disappeared. Then the threats started." Elena thought of the brick through her window. "What kind of threats?" "First it was just warnings. Then our house got vandalized. Dad's tires were slashed. Someone broke in and stole his files." Marcus's voice cracked. "The night before the accident. He told me he finally had proof. Real proof. Said he was going to blow it all wide open." Elena's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "The accident? That's what they called it. Dad's brakes failed on Miller's Bridge. They found alcohol in his system. Said he'd been drinking. But Dad never drank. Never." Marcus wiped angrily at his eyes. "They destroyed him. Made everyone think he was just some drunk cop who killed himself. But I know better." Through the windshield, Elena watched Sophia swinging, her face tilted to the sky. The girl's carefree motion contrasted sharply with the weight of Marcus's words. "Did your father ever tell you names? Who was involved?" Marcus shook his head. "He protected me. Didn't want me to know too much, but..." He hesitated. "Officer Kent was one of them. I recognized his voice that night at the store. He used to come to our house, try to reason with Dad." Elena's mind raced, connecting dots. Kent's aggression that night hadn't just been random. He'd recognized Marcus, known who he was. "Is there anything else? Anything at all that might help?" Just what Dad used to say. That it went higher than anyone thought. That... Marcus stopped suddenly, his eyes fixed on something in the rearview mirror. Elena looked up. A black SUV had pulled into the park's lot, its tinted windows revealing nothing of who might be inside. "Time to go," she said quietly. "Sophia! Come on, honey. We need to head home." Sophia ran to the car, cheeks flushed from the cool air. As they pulled out of the park, Elena took a different route home, making several random turns. The SUV stayed 3 car lengths behind, never losing them. Marcus slumped in his seat. "I'm sorry, Miss Ramirez. I shouldn't have told you. Now they'll come after you, too." Elena checked her mirrors again. The SUV was still there, its presence a dark reminder of what they faced. "No, Marcus, you did the right thing. Sometimes the truth is dangerous, but that's exactly why it needs to be told." She drove carefully, her mind working through what she'd learned. A organized ring of corrupt officers, systematic harassment of minorities, cover-ups that reached high into the department, and somewhere, proof that had died with Marcus's father, or had it. The black SUV followed them all the way home, its engine a low growl in the gathering dusk. The wooden pew creaked softly as Elena knelt in prayer, her hands clasped tightly together. Morning sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Michael's Church, casting pools of colored light across the worn carpet. The familiar scent of incense hung in the air, usually bringing her comfort. But today, even this sacred space felt heavy with tension. Sophia stood beside her mother, carefully lighting a small white candle. The flame flickered, joining dozens of others in the metal stand, each one representing someone's hopes, fears, or remembrance. Elena watched her daughter's solemn concentration, noting how much older Sophia looked in these quiet moments. "For Poppy," Sophia whispered, setting the candle in place. "And for Marcus." Elena's throat tightened. She wrapped an arm around Sophia's shoulders, drawing her close. Together, they watched the dancing flames, letting the peace of the moment wash over them. The church was nearly empty this early, with just a few elderly parishioners scattered among the pews, heads bowed in their own private devotions. As the morning service began, more families filed in. Elena noticed the subtle shifts, the empty spaces in their usual pew, the way some people chose seats further away. Mrs. Garcia, who had sat next to them every Sunday for 5 years, now sat 3 rows back. The isolation felt like a physical weight. Father Michael's sermon touched on courage and standing up for what's right, though Elena wondered if she imagined the occasional glances in her direction. Sophia fidgeted beside her, clearly sensing the underlying tension. Elena squeezed her hand reassuringly. After communion, Elena closed her eyes, praying not for herself but for strength to protect those who needed it. Marcus, Sophia, and all the others who had no voice. She thought of her husband's journal entries, his own quiet battle against corruption, and felt a renewed sense of purpose. As the service ended and people began to file out, Elena heard the whispers. She tried to focus on gathering her things, but fragments of conversations drifted over. "She's causing trouble where there doesn't need to be any," someone muttered. "But if what they're saying is true," another voice responded. "My brother's on the force. Says she's just trying to make a name for herself. Did you hear about that boy she's protecting? His father was dirty." Sophia pressed closer to Elena's side, her face showing she heard too. Elena straightened her shoulders, head high as they walked toward the exit. She wouldn't let them see how much the words stung. Near the holy water font, a cluster of parishioners didn't even try to lower their voices as they debated. "She's doing what needs to be done," Mrs. Thompson, the choir director, insisted. "Those officers crossed a line. But going against her own department?" Mr. Rivera shook his head. "That's not loyalty." "Loyalty to what?" Someone else jumped in. "To corruption?" Elena guided Sophia toward the door, trying to shield her from the argument. But then a warm hand caught her arm. She turned to find Mrs. Alvarez, a grandmother of 6 who had attended St. Michael's for decades. The older woman's eyes were kind, but fierce. "Don't stop," Mrs. Alvarez whispered, squeezing Elena's hand. "We need you, more than you know." She pressed something into Elena's palm, A small prayer card of Street Michael, patron saint of police officers. The simple gesture of support brought unexpected tears to Elena's eyes. She managed a grateful nod, clutching the card tightly as she and Sophia finally stepped out into the morning sunshine. The drive home started quietly, both lost in thought. Then, Sophia spoke up. "Those people at church, they don't understand, do they?" Elena glanced at her daughter in the rearview mirror. "Some do, mija, some don't want to." "Like Mrs. Alvarez understands," Sophia said thoughtfully. "She reminded me of Abuela." Elena smiled, thinking of her own mother's unwavering sense of justice. "Yes, exactly like that." They drove through familiar streets, past the corner store where everything had started with Marcus just days ago. Elena's mind was already turning to Monday, planning her next steps in the investigation. The prayer card sat on her dashboard, catching the sunlight. Her temporary peace shattered as she pulled into the station parking lot. She needed to pick up some files from her office before heading home, but something was wrong. Even from here, she could see a small crowd gathered near the building's side entrance, the one leading to internal affairs. "Stay in the car," she told Sophia firmly, putting the vehicle in park. Her heart pounded as she approached, badge ready. The whispers and pointing started immediately. Officers and administrative staff stood in clusters, staring at her office door. Elena pushed through, then stopped cold. Bright red paint covered her door, dripping down onto the concrete step. The word "rat" screamed out in foot-high letters, still wet enough that tiny rivulets ran down like blood. Elena stood very still, absorbing the sight. Behind her, someone snickered. Others shuffled uncomfortably. She thought of Mrs. Alvarez's words in church, of her husband's journal, of Marcus's bruised face and Sophia's worried eyes. She pulled out her phone and took several clear photos of the vandalism, making sure to capture the witnesses in the background. Then she turned to face the crowd, her voice steady and clear. "Anyone want to give me a statement about who did this?" Silence answered her. One by one, people began to drift away, avoiding her gaze. Elena watched them go, memorizing faces. She knew Sophia could see everything from the car, and her heart ached for what her daughter was witnessing. The paint dripped steadily, each drop echoing in the heavy silence. Rain drummed against the kitchen windows as Elena spread her husband's old case files across the wooden table. Tom Harrison sat beside her, his weathered hands carefully sorting through yellowed papers. The kitchen light cast a warm glow over their makeshift investigation headquarters, while Marcus perched on a stool nearby, watching intently. "Your father mentioned something about private security firms," Elena said, sliding a document toward Marcus. "Does this company name look familiar?" Marcus leaned forward, squinting at the faded letterhead. "Yeah, Sentinel Shield Services. They hired a bunch of ex-cops after Dad started asking questions." Tom adjusted his reading glasses, examining a financial statement. "Look at these payments, Elena. All going to shell companies, but the dates match incidents of harassment reported in minority neighborhoods." Elena grabbed her notebook, jotting down details. Her husband's familiar handwriting filled the margins of old reports, cryptic notes, and connections he'd been piecing together before his death. Each page felt like a message from the past, guiding them forward. "Officer Kent's name keeps coming up," Tom muttered, tapping a document. "These deposits to his account, they're way too regular for side work." Marcus slid off his stool and moved closer. "Dad used to say Kent ran protection rackets. Store owners had to pay or face random inspections." Elena's heart raced as patterns emerged. Her husband hadn't died in a random accident. He'd been close to exposing something bigger. She pulled out her laptop, cross-referencing dates with her own investigation files. "Look at this," she said, turning the screen. "Every time a complaint was filed against these officers, there's a corresponding payment from Sentinel Shield. They're buying silence." Tom whistled low. "And using that private security company to launder the money. Smart setup. Hard to trace." Elena stood up and paced the kitchen, her mind racing. "We need to connect Kent to the company directly. Marcus, did your father keep any other records?" The teenager nodded slowly. "He had a safety deposit box. Mom still has the key, but she's scared to touch it." "Would she let us see it?" Elena asked gently. "It could make all the difference." Marcus pulled out his phone. Let me call her. She trusts you after what you did for me." While Marcus stepped into the living room to make the call, Tom gathered the scattered papers into neat piles. "Elena, you know what this means? This goes higher than Kent. Someone's protecting this operation from inside the department." She nodded grimly. "That's why internal affairs investigations keep disappearing. But with your testimony about past cases, these financial records, and Marcus's father's evidence, we can break the whole thing open." Tom finished. Marcus returned, his face brightening. "Mom says yes. She'll meet us at the bank tomorrow morning." Elena felt a surge of hope. After weeks of threats and isolation, they finally had something solid. She checked her watch. Past midnight. Sophia would be sleeping soundly upstairs, watched over by Mrs. Rodriguez from next door. The next morning passed in a blur of activity. Marcus's mother, tearful but determined, handed over a thick envelope from the safety deposit box. Inside, they found photographs, bank statements, and a detailed letter from Marcus's father explaining the entire corruption scheme. Back at her kitchen table, Elena organized everything into a comprehensive report. Tom helped her cross-reference dates and names, while Marcus filled in details about conversations he'd overheard at home before his father's disgrace. "This is it," Elena breathed, looking at the finished file. "Every connection, every payment, every cover-up, it's all here." She carefully scanned each document, creating digital copies and storing them in multiple secure locations. Tom watched with approval as she followed every protocol for handling sensitive evidence. That afternoon, Elena walked into the federal building, her heart pounding but her steps steady. She carried copies of everything, the originals safely stored with Tom. The federal investigator spent hours reviewing her evidence, asking detailed questions about each document. When she finally emerged, the sun was setting. She drove home slowly, letting the reality sink in. After weeks of fear and pressure, she'd done it. The investigation was officially out of her hands and into federal jurisdiction. No one could bury it now. Sophia was sitting on the front steps when Elena pulled into the driveway. Her daughter ran to meet her, dark eyes wide with concern. "Mom, is everything okay?" Elena wrapped her arms around Sophia, holding her close. The sweet, familiar scent of her daughter's shampoo filled her nose as she breathed deeply. All the stress and worry of the past weeks seemed to melt away in that embrace. "It's over, Mia," Elena whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "It's finally over." Elena's alarm buzzed at 6 a.m., just like any other morning. She reached for her phone, squinting at the screen, and froze. 27 missed calls lit up her display, along with a flood of text messages. Her heart pounding, she opened the first news alert. "Internal Affairs Officer under investigation for evidence tampering," the headline screamed. Elena sat bolt upright, her hands shaking as she scrolled through the article. According to the report, she was being accused of fabricating evidence against fellow officers and manipulating witness statements. "No, no, no," she whispered, throwing off her covers and rushing to her laptop. She logged into the department's system, frantically searching for her case files. The folders were there, but when she clicked on them, every document was gone, vanished, as if they'd never existed. Her phone rang. It was Tom. "Elena, turn on your TV. Channel 7. She grabbed the remote with trembling fingers and clicked on the morning news. There, in high definition, was Police Chief Richards standing at a podium. "We take these allegations very seriously," he said, his face grave. "Officer Ramirez's conduct has cast a shadow over the entire department. We've placed her under immediate suspension pending a full investigation." Sophia appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, clutching her phone. "Mom? Everyone at school is talking about it. They're saying horrible things." Elena opened her arms, and Sophia ran into them. "It's not true, Mija. None of it's true." "I know, Mom." Sophia buried her face in Elena's shoulder. "But I'm scared." Elena's phone buzzed again, a text from Marcus's mother. "Have you seen Marcus? He never came home from school yesterday." The room spun. Elena steadied herself against the wall, reading the message again. Marcus was missing. The boy she'd promised to protect had vanished. She dialed Tom immediately. "They took him," she said, her voice breaking. "Tom, they took Marcus. "I'm on my way," he replied. "Don't leave your house." Elena paced the kitchen, making call after call. Marcus's teachers hadn't seen him after final bell. His friends said he'd started walking home alone. No one knew anything. Or maybe they were too afraid to talk. Sophia sat at the kitchen table, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, please stop. They're going to hurt you too. We can move away, start over somewhere else." "Baby, I can't." "Please!" Sophia's voice cracked. "I already lost Dad. I can't lose you too." Elena's chest tightened at her daughter's words. The weight of everything, the missing files, Marcus's disappearance, her suspension, Sophia's fear, crashed down on her at once. Her legs gave out, and she sank into a kitchen chair. The morning sun streamed through the window, casting shadows across the table where just days ago she'd felt so sure of victory. Now her carefully gathered evidence was gone, her career in shambles, and an innocent boy was missing because she dared to stand up against corruption. She stared at her badge, lying on the table, the metal no longer gleaming but dull in the morning light. Everything she'd believed in, everything she'd fought for, seemed to mock her now. The system she'd dedicated her life to had turned against her with frightening efficiency. Sophia's small hand slipped into hers. "Mom?" Elena looked at her daughter's tear-stained face and realized she had no answers. Not anymore. The truth hadn't set them free. It had only brought more darkness. Her phone buzzed with another news alert. Suspended officer's history of misconduct revealed. More lies, more fabricated evidence against her. The machine was working overtime to destroy her credibility. She thought of Marcus, somewhere out there, probably terrified. She thought of his father, who'd tried to expose corruption years ago and paid the price. She thought of her own husband, whose final words urged her to do what was right, no matter the cost. But the cost felt unbearable now. Elena slumped forward, resting her head in her hands. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence, marking each moment that Marcus remained missing, each moment that justice slipped further away. Her faith, in the badge, in the system, in everything she'd built her life around, lay shattered like the broken glass from her vandalized window. Sophia's arms wrapped around her shoulders, but Elena couldn't find the strength to lift her head. For the first time since this fight began, she had no plan, no next move, no hope to cling to. The kitchen table that had been her command center, where she'd spread out files and built her case, now felt like an altar where justice itself had died. The morning light grew stronger, but Elena remained frozen in her chair, defeated by the very system she'd sworn to protect and serve. Elena sat in the dim light of her kitchen, her husband's photograph propped against an empty coffee mug. Miguel's warm smile seemed to mock her now, a reminder of everything she'd lost. Her badge lay discarded on the table, its silver surface dulled in the weak morning light. The house was quiet except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator. She hadn't slept all night, her mind racing with images of Marcus. Somewhere out there, scared and alone. The weight of failure pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. "I'm sorry," she whispered to Miguel's picture. "I tried to be strong, but they won." Her fingers traced the frame, remembering his touch, his courage, his unwavering sense of right and wrong. A gentle knock at the front door made her jump. Through the window she recognized Tom's familiar silhouette. Elena didn't move to answer it, but heard his key in the lock, the spare she'd given him after the brick incident. "You look terrible," Tom said softly, setting down a paper bag that smelled of fresh pastries. His weathered face creased with concern as he pulled out a chair. Elena managed a weak smile. "Thanks for the compliment. You haven't slept." "How can I?" Her voice cracked. "Marcus is missing. My career is over, Sophia." She glanced toward her daughter's bedroom. "I've put her through hell for nothing." Tom's hand covered hers, warm and steady. "Your husband didn't marry a quitter. Miguel didn't have a child to protect," Elena shot back, but her words lacked real anger. She was too tired for anger now. "No," Tom agreed, "but he had something worth fighting for, just like you do." He nodded toward Sophia's bedroom. "That girl needs to see her mother stand up, not give up." Elena shook her head. "They've won, Tom. The evidence is gone. Marcus is gone. I have nothing left to fight with." "Mom?" Sophia's small voice came from the hallway. She stood there in her pajamas, clutching her tablet to her chest. Her eyes were red, rimmed, but determined. "Mija, you should be sleeping," Elena said, trying to hide the defeat in her voice. Sophia walked to the table, her chin lifted in a way that reminded Elena so much of Miguel, it made her chest ache. "I have something you need to hear." Before Elena could respond, Sophia pressed play on her tablet. A boy's voice filled the kitchen, sharp and clear. "Dad says they're going to take care of Ramirez tonight, teaching her what happens to rats." Another voice. "My dad, too, says they got plans for that Marcus kid to keep her quiet." Elena sat up straighter, her exhaustion forgotten. "Sophia, when did you record this?" "At school yesterday, in the cafeteria." Sophia's voice trembled slightly. "I've been recording stuff ever since that first night, when people started talking about you." Tom leaned forward, his eyes intense. "How many recordings do you have?" "Lots." Sophia scrolled through files on her tablet. "Some kids like to brag about what their dads say at home. About the money, about Marcus's dad, about—" She swallowed hard. "About making people disappear." Elena stared at her daughter, seeing her in a new light. While she had been fighting through official channels, Sophia had been gathering evidence in her own way. Pride and fear tangled in her chest. "Play them all," Tom said quietly. For the next hour, they listened. Sophia had captured countless conversations, students repeating their parents' unguarded moments, bits of phone calls overheard in hallways, teachers discussing rumors in low voices. Each recording added another piece to the puzzle Elena had been trying to solve. "They never noticed me," Sophia explained. "I'm just a kid with a tablet. Nobody thinks kids are paying attention." Elena pulled her daughter close, kissing the top of her head. "You're so brave, Mija, but also so foolish. Do you know how dangerous this was?" "Like mother, like daughter," Tom said with a gentle smile. Elena looked at the scattered evidence on her table. Miguel's photo, her badge, Sophia's tablet full of damning recordings. Something stirred in her chest, something that felt like hope. "We need help," she said slowly. "The right kind of help." Tom nodded, understanding in his eyes. "The community, regular folks who are tired of being afraid." "The lady from church," Sophia added. "The one who squeezed your hand. And Marcus's neighbors, they've seen things too." Elena stood up, her exhaustion replaced by renewed purpose. She picked up her badge, turning it over in her hands. "They tried to isolate us, to make us feel alone." She looked at Tom and Sophia. "But we're not alone, are we?" "No," Tom agreed. "And neither is Marcus. We'll find him." Sophia hugged her tablet close. "I can help. Kids at school know things. They just need someone to listen." Elena cupped her daughter's face, seeing Miguel's strength shining in those young eyes. What she had seen as her greatest weakness, being a mother, having someone to protect, had become her greatest source of strength. Sophia hadn't just gathered evidence. She had reminded Elena why this fight mattered. "First," Elena said, "we need to make copies of these recordings. Then we need to talk to everyone who's been afraid to speak up until now." She straightened her shoulders, feeling the weight of her badge differently now. "It's time to show them they're not alone either." Tom stood, his presence solid and reassuring. "I'll make some calls. There are good people waiting for someone to take a stand." Elena looked at her husband's photo one last time, but now his smile didn't seem to mock her. Instead, she saw what she'd missed before: pride. Pride in the family he'd left behind, in the strength they'd found together. The morning sun broke through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the table. But for the first time since Marcus's disappearance, Elena felt the darkness beginning to lift. She had lost this round, but the fight wasn't over. Not while she had her daughter's courage, Tom's loyalty, and a community waiting to find its voice. The morning sun barely peeked over the horizon when Elena and Tom pulled into the church parking lot. The old brick building stood quiet and solemn against the pale sky. Pastor Martinez waited at the entrance, his weathered face creased with concern. Behind him, a small group of veterans in their worn military caps huddled near the door, talking in low voices. "You sure about this?" Tom asked, his hand resting reassuringly on Elena's shoulder. Elena nodded, though her stomach churned. Marcus is out there somewhere, we need help. They walked up the worn concrete steps. The veterans straightened as Elena approached. Among them was Jim Cooper, who had served with Tom in Vietnam. His silver hair gleamed in the early light as he extended his hand. "Mrs. Ramirez," he said firmly. "Tom filled us in. This isn't right, what they're doing to you and that boy." Inside the church basement, folding chairs formed a circle under fluorescent lights. The air smelled of coffee and old hymnals. Pastor Martinez had gathered not just the veterans, but also key community leaders: Sarah from the women's shelter, Dr. Rodriguez from the free clinic, and several church elders. Elena's voice shook as she began telling her story. She described finding Marcus that rainy night, the threats, the missing evidence, and finally, Marcus's disappearance. The room grew still as she spoke, faces hardening with each new detail. "This isn't just about one boy anymore," Tom added, standing beside Elena. "It's about what kind of town we want to be." Sarah from the women's shelter spoke up first. "The single mothers in my group, they've been afraid to report abuse because of these same officers. We're with you, Elena." Dr. Rodriguez nodded grimly. "I've treated too many suspicious injuries. People too scared to tell me what really happened." One by one, they shared similar stories. A pattern emerged, one of intimidation, cover-ups, and silence. But now, that silence was breaking. Pastor Martinez raised his hands. "Then we act, today." The next few hours passed in a blur of planning and phone calls. The veterans organized a search party for Marcus. Church members began crafting signs and posters. Sarah rallied her network of single mothers. Dr. Rodriguez reached out to other medical professionals who had treated suspicious injuries. By noon, the movement had spread beyond the church basement. Elena watched in amazement as neighbors she hadn't seen in weeks emerged from their homes, carrying homemade "Justice for Marcus" signs. Teenage girls from Sophia's school handed out flyers. The local coffee shop owner taped a poster in his window, then another, and another. Tom drove Elena through the neighborhoods, pointing out growing clusters of supporters. Outside the police station, a peaceful group of veterans stood watch, their presence a quiet reminder of honor and duty. At the park, mothers gathered with their children, sharing stories and organizing prayer circles. The local newspaper editor, who had initially ignored Elena's story, couldn't ignore the groundswell. By mid-afternoon, reporters appeared, capturing images of the growing movement. Elena's phone buzzed constantly with messages of support and tips about Marcus's possible whereabouts. "Look at this," Tom said softly as they drove past the community center. A group of elderly ladies had set up a command center, coordinating search parties and manning phones. Their usual bingo cards lay forgotten as they worked with fierce determination. Elena felt tears well up. Just yesterday, she had felt so alone. Now everywhere she looked, she saw allies. The town she had thought had abandoned her was awakening, finding its conscience, its voice. As evening approached, Elena returned home exhausted but hopeful. Sophia ran to meet her at the door, her eyes bright with excitement. "Mom, come see." Elena followed her daughter to the window. The sight made her breath catch. Up and down the street, candles flickered on porches. Dozens of them, then hundreds as she looked further. Each light represented a family, a household, standing with her. The message was clear. She wasn't alone anymore. From next door, Mrs. Chen waved, her candle casting a warm glow. Across the street, the Martinez family had put out 3 candles. Even old Mr. Peterson, who rarely left his house, stood on his porch with a flashlight. Elena pressed her hand against the cool window glass, watching the lights multiply as darkness fell. Each flame seemed to whisper, "We're here, we're with you, we won't let them win." Tom appeared beside her, his voice gruff with emotion. "See that, Elena? That's what justice looks like. That's what community means." The candles continued to flicker in the growing night. A constellation of hope spread across the town. Elena stood at her window for a long time, drawing strength from each steady flame. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she wasn't facing them alone. Tonight, An entire community had chosen to stand up, to shine their lights against the darkness. A collective courage had awakened in her town, stronger than fear, more powerful than threats. As Elena watched the candles glow, she knew that whatever came next, this moment had already changed everything. The silence was broken. The truth would be heard. And somewhere out there, Marcus would know they were coming for him. The next morning, Elena's quiet neighborhood erupted with activity. News vans lined her street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metal sunflowers. Cameras clicked and whirred as reporters huddled on her front lawn, their microphones ready. Elena stood in her living room, hands trembling as she smoothed her navy blazer. Sophia squeezed her mother's hand. "You can do this, Mom." Tom appeared beside them, his expression firm but encouraging. "Remember, Elena, the truth is on your side." Taking a deep breath, Elena opened her front door. Camera flashes burst like lightning. Reporters shouted questions, their voices overlapping in a chaotic chorus. Elena raised her hand, and surprisingly, they fell silent. "My name is Elena Ramirez," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm an internal affairs officer, a widow, and a mother. But today, I'm here as someone who believes in justice." The cameras inched closer as she continued. "Last week, I witnessed 2 officers assaulting a 15-year-old boy named Marcus Walker. When I tried to protect him, I discovered something much darker within our police department." Tom stepped forward, holding her late husband's journal. "This belongs to Officer James Ramirez, who died in the line of duty 3 years ago. These pages document the same corruption Elena uncovered." Reporters scribbled frantically as Tom read excerpts detailing suspicious payments, covered-up assaults, and systematic harassment of minorities. Elena watched their faces change from skepticism to shock. "My husband wrote his final entry the day before he died," Elena said, her voice catching. "Do the right thing, even when it costs you everything." I didn't understand then what he meant. I do now. Inside the house, Sophia sat at her computer, her fingers flying over the keyboard. With a determined click, she uploaded her recording to social media. The video showed clear voices of other students discussing their parents' plans to silence Elena. "Mom," Sophia called from the doorway, "it's spreading. People are sharing it everywhere." Elena turned back to the cameras. "Marcus Walker isn't just missing. He was taken. To silence him. To silence me. But we won't be silent anymore." Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Tom's did too. Then the reporter's phone started chiming like a digital symphony. A young reporter in the front raised her phone. "Miss Ramirez, breaking news. Marcus Walker has been found alive. Someone called in an anonymous tip. He's in an abandoned cabin near Miller's Creek." Elena's knees nearly buckled. Tom steadied her as tears sprang to her eyes. Sophia rushed out, throwing her arms around her mother's waist. "Is he okay?" Elena managed to ask. "The report says he's dehydrated but otherwise unharmed," the reporter confirmed. "Police are bringing him out now." Elena looked into the nearest camera, her voice thick with emotion. "To whoever called in that tip, thank you. To everyone who's been afraid to speak up, your time is now. The truth doesn't stay buried forever." Cameras continued rolling as Elena hugged Sophia close, both of them crying tears of relief. Tom stood protectively beside them, his hand on Elena's shoulder. The morning sun broke through the clouds, washing the scene in golden light. "I need to go," Elena said firmly. "Marcus needs to know he's not alone anymore." As she turned to leave, neighbors began emerging from their homes. Mrs. Chen from next door, the Rodriguez family from across the street, old Mr. Peterson with his cane. They formed a quiet line along the sidewalk, standing in silent support. A reporter called out one final question. "Officer Ramirez, are you afraid of retaliation?" Elena paused at her car door, Sophia already in the passenger seat and Tom climbing into his truck behind them. She looked at the gathering crowd of neighbors, at her daughter's brave face, at her husband's journal in her hand. "I was afraid," she answered honestly. "But there are things stronger than fear. Truth is stronger, justice is stronger, and this community, we're stronger together." With that, Elena slid into her car. The news crews parted like a sea. cameras still rolling as she drove toward Miller's Creek, toward Marcus, toward whatever came next. The time for silence was over. The truth was finally breaking free. The hospital corridor seemed endless as Elena rushed toward Marcus's room, her footsteps echoing against the sterile walls. Sophia clutched her hand, trying to keep up with her mother's determined pace. Tom followed close behind, his weathered face etched with concern. Room 312. Elena paused at the doorway, her heart pounding. Through the window, she could see Marcus lying in the hospital bed, looking small and fragile under the white sheets. His face was bruised, but his eyes were open. "Marcus?" Elena's voice trembled as she entered. The boy turned his head slowly. When he saw Elena, tears welled up in his eyes. "You found me," he whispered. Elena moved quickly to his bedside, gently taking his hand. "Of course we did. We never stopped looking." Sophia approached the other side of the bed, her young face full of sympathy. "The whole town helped," she said proudly. "Everyone had candles in their windows for you." Marcus managed a weak smile. "They kept me in that cabin, said nobody would care. I was gone." His voice cracked. "But you cared." "We all cared," Elena assured him, squeezing his hand. "And now we have proof of everything. Your father would be so proud of you, Marcus. You stayed strong." Tom cleared his throat from the doorway. "Speaking of proof," he said, holding up his phone, "the FBI just arrived at the station. They're taking over the investigation." Elena felt a wave of relief wash over her. The federal authorities would ensure no evidence disappeared this time. No more corrupt local officers could sweep things under the rug. Throughout the day, a steady stream of developments poured in. Officer Kent was the first to be arrested, led out of the police station in handcuffs as news cameras rolled. His arrogance had finally crumbled, replaced by the fear he'd so often inflicted on others. Elena stayed with Marcus, watching the news unfold on the small hospital TV. More officers were brought in for questioning. Documents emerged, revealing years of covered-up misconduct. The dam had broken, and the truth was flooding out. By evening, Chief Doyle's perfectly polished image began to crack. Security footage surfaced, showing him entering the records room late at night, right when Elena's evidence had vanished. His political connections couldn't save him from the mounting pressure. "Did you see?" Sophia exclaimed, pointing at the TV. "They're showing the recording I made at school." Indeed, her daughter's quick thinking had provided crucial evidence. The children of corrupt officers, bragging about their father's plans, had unknowingly helped expose the whole operation. Marcus watched the coverage with quiet intensity. "My dad tried to stop them," he said softly. "That's why they ruined his reputation. But now, everyone knows the truth." Elena nodded. "Sometimes it takes a whole community to bring truth to light. One voice becomes many." The next morning, more arrests followed. Officers who had maintained the blue wall of silence now faced charges as accessories. The mayor called for a complete departmental overhaul. Then came the moment they'd all been waiting for. Chief Doyle appeared on the courthouse steps, his usual confidence replaced by defeat. Cameras flashed as he announced his immediate resignation, admitting to failures in leadership while carefully avoiding any direct admission of guilt. Elena watched from Marcus's hospital room as supporters gathered outside the courthouse, holding signs reading "Justice Prevails" and "Thank you, Elena Ramirez." The sight brought tears to her eyes. "Ready to make your statement?" Tom asked gently from the doorway. Elena looked at Marcus, who gave her an encouraging nod. She squeezed his hand one last time. "You rest and get stronger. We'll be back soon." Outside the courthouse, Elena held Sophia's hand tightly as they climbed the steps. The crowd parted respectfully, many reaching out to pat her shoulder or whisper, "Thanks." These were the same people who had shunned her in the grocery store just days ago. Now they understood why she had fought so hard. The federal prosecutor met them at the top of the steps, her face serious but kind. "Officer Ramirez, your testimony today will ensure these crimes never happen again in this department." Elena straightened her shoulders and nodded. She had carried her badge with pride all these years, believing in what it stood for. Now she would help restore its honor. As they entered the courthouse, the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Sophia beamed up at her mother, no longer afraid but filled with pride. They had stood their ground, fought for what was right, and shown that justice could prevail, even against those sworn to uphold it. Cameras flashed as Elena paused at the courthouse doors. For a moment, she thought of her late husband and his words about doing the right thing, no matter the cost. She had paid that price in fear and isolation, but she'd never been truly alone. The community had found its conscience and its courage. The heavy doors opened, and Elena walked through them with her head held high, ready to tell the truth that would change their town forever. Elena smoothed her navy blazer and straightened her badge as she sat in the crowded hearing room. Morning sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished wood floors. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap, but she kept her chin high, remembering all the battles that had led to this moment. The room buzzed with whispered conversations. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, some friendly, others still wary. In the front row, Sophia sat between Tom and Marcus, both dressed in their Sunday best. Sophia kept fidgeting with the ribbon in her hair, a nervous habit she'd picked up from Elena. Chief Commissioner Wallace, a stern woman with steel-gray hair, called the room to order. The bang of her gavel made Elena's heart jump, though she maintained her composed expression. This was the moment everything would change, for better or worse. "Officer Elena Ramirez," Wallace began, her voice carrying clearly through the now silent room. "We are here today to address the events of the past month and their implications for both you and this department." Elena nodded respectfully, though her throat felt dry. She thought of all the late nights, the threatening notes, the shattered window, the fear in Sophia's eyes, and steeled herself for whatever came next. "The evidence you gathered, along with the subsequent federal investigation, has exposed a level of corruption that deeply troubled this commission," Wallace continued. "Your persistence in the face of intimidation and your unwavering commitment to justice exemplify the highest standards of law enforcement." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Elena caught sight of Officer Kent and his cronies shifting uncomfortably in their seats near the back. Their recent arrests had sent shockwaves through the department. "Furthermore," Wallace pressed on, "your ability to mobilize community support and bridge the gap between law enforcement and citizens has demonstrated exceptional leadership qualities." Elena felt tears threatening to form but blinked them back. She thought of the candlelit porches, the rallying neighbors, the kind woman at church who had squeezed her hand that Sunday morning. "Therefore, it is the decision of this commission not only to fully reinstate you to active duty, but to promote you to the position of lieutenant, heading our newly established Integrity and Community Relations Task Force." The room erupted in applause. Elena sat stunned for a moment, hardly daring to believe what she'd heard. She looked over at Sophia, who was practically bouncing in her seat with excitement. "Stand up, Mom," Sophia mouthed, beaming. Elena rose slowly, her legs slightly unsteady. She faced the commission with dignity, though her heart was racing. "Thank you, Commissioner. I am honored by your trust and will continue to serve with the same dedication to justice that has guided me throughout my career." More applause followed, and this time it was different. Officers who had once turned away from her in the hallways were now standing, joining in the celebration. She saw genuine respect in their eyes, perhaps for the first time. Wallace handed her a new badge and shield, the metal catching the sunlight. "Congratulations, Lieutenant Ramirez. We expect great things from your task force." As Elena accepted the badge, she caught sight of her reflection in its polished surface. She saw not just herself, but everything she represented. Hope for change, proof that one person's courage could make a difference, a promise of better days ahead. The formal ceremony concluded, and people began moving about the room. Several officers approached to shake her hand or offer congratulations. Even some who had doubted her came forward to express their support for the new initiative. Tom made his way through the crowd, his eyes twinkling with pride. He stopped before her and slowly, deliberately tipped his hat. A gesture of deep respect from the old-school veteran. "Your husband would be mighty proud today, Elena," he said softly. "Mighty proud indeed." Sophia couldn't contain herself any longer. She rushed forward and threw her arms around Elena's waist, nearly knocking her mother off balance. Elena held her daughter close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Mom," Sophia whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "you protected us all." Elena stroked her daughter's hair, too moved to speak for a moment. Everything she had fought for, justice, safety, a better future, was embodied in this child who had shown such courage through it all. The morning light streamed stronger now through the windows, warming the room. Elena stood tall, her daughter at her side, her new badge gleaming, and her heart full of purpose. The road ahead would have its challenges, but she was ready to face them. Not alone anymore, but with the support of her community and the strength of her convictions. The October morning wrapped Elena and Sophia in crisp autumn air as they walked down Main Street toward Sophia's school. Golden leaves danced around their feet, and the sidewalks glistened from last night's rain. Elena squeezed her daughter's hand, savoring the simple joy of this moment, something that had felt impossible just weeks ago. "Look, Mom." Sophia pointed across the street, where Marcus stood by the bus stop. The teenager's bruises had faded, and though he still carried himself with caution, a shy smile crossed his face as he waved at them. The sight warmed Elena's heart. Here was living proof that standing up for what was right could make a real difference. "Good morning, Marcus," Elena called out. Sophia waved enthusiastically, and Marcus's smile grew broader. He no longer looked like a scared victim but like a regular teenager heading to school, his backpack slung casually over one shoulder. As they continued their walk, the town seemed to come alive around them. Mr. Peterson, the hardware store owner, who had avoided eye contact for weeks, now held the door open as they passed. "Officer Ramirez," he said with genuine respect, tipping his baseball cap. Outside the diner, Mrs. Garcia wiped down tables on the patio. Her face lit up when she saw them. "Buenos dias, Elena. Sophia. I saved some fresh churros for after school." The old woman had been one of the first to light a candle on her porch in solidarity during those dark days. A group of mothers gathered near the school crossing, chatted and smiled warmly as Elena and Sophia approached. One of them, Sarah, whose son had been in Sophia's class since kindergarten, stepped forward with tears in her eyes. "Elena," she said softly, "what you did. You made this town safe for all our children." The other mothers nodded in agreement, and Elena felt her throat tighten with emotion. As they turned onto Cedar Street, they passed the Veterans Memorial where Tom often spent his mornings. Today, he stood with 3 other veterans, all wearing their service caps. When they spotted Elena, they straightened their backs and offered crisp salutes. Tom's eyes twinkled with pride, the same pride she'd seen in her late husband's eyes whenever he spoke of serving with honor. "At ease, gentlemen," Elena said with a gentle laugh, but her voice wavered with emotion. These men had stood by her when others wouldn't, understanding better than most the cost of fighting for what was right. The bells of St. Michael's Church began to ring, their clear tones floating across the morning air. Elena remembered kneeling in those pews during her darkest moments, feeling alone and abandoned. Now the sound felt like a celebration, a reminder that faith could sustain even through the stormiest nights. Sophia tugged at her hand. "Mom, remember when we used to hurry past everyone? Now it takes forever to get to school because everybody wants to talk to you." Elena chuckled. "Is that a complaint I'm hearing, mija?" "No way." Sophia's ponytail bounced as she shook her head. "I love it. I love that everyone knows my mom is a hero." "I'm not a hero, sweetheart. I just did what was right." "That's what makes you a hero, Mom," Sophia said with 12-year-old wisdom that caught Elena off guard. They approached the school's front steps where other children were streaming in. A few months ago, parents had pulled their kids away when Elena approached. Now, several students called out greeting to Sophia, and their parents smiled warmly at Elena. Officer Rodriguez, newly assigned to school security after the corruption sweep, stood at attention. "Good morning, Lieutenant Ramirez," he said with genuine respect. The title still felt new to Elena, but she appreciated how it represented not just a promotion, but a chance to create real change. As they reached Sophia's classroom, her daughter turned and hugged her tight. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she whispered, then darted inside to join her friends. Elena watched her go, remembering the tears and fear in those same eyes not so long ago. Now her daughter walked tall, unafraid. Turning to head back, Elena paused on the school steps. The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting warm rays across the town square. She lifted her chin, feeling the light on her face. The weight of her badge felt different now. Not a burden, but a symbol of what was possible when courage, faith, and love stood stronger than fear and corruption. Around her, the town hummed with morning activity. Shop owners raised their shutters, neighbors greeted each other on sidewalks, and children's laughter echoed from the playground. This was what she had fought for. Not just justice in the abstract, but the simple dignity of a community where people could walk without fear, where a mother could raise her child in peace, where doing the right thing still mattered. The sun warmed her face as she began her walk to the station, ready to start another day, serving the community she had helped heal. The morning light caught her badge, making it shine, a beacon of hope for anyone who might need protection, just as she had once protected a scared teenager in the rain. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Elena Ramirez, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.